Well, hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to M4L Academy. I am particularly excited today because we're in DC recording our Rhetoric for the Republic and had an opportunity to do a deep dive interview with one of our speakers, Andy Liddell. He's absolutely incredible. He has some amazing insights to share about the EdTech industry, and I'm going to let him explain why he has such good insights to share about it. Not to mention the data collection that you probably don't realize is happening on your children's devices from those schools. So without further ado, I'm super excited to be welcoming Andy Liddell to the show. And the way that we got introduced, really, or the way that you were kind enough to respond to me, I should say, is because I heard about you first on Screen Strong, and your story was absolutely amazing. Not to mention what you were doing was so encouraging, and this has been just such an eye-opening journey for me because I didn't realize any of this stuff was happening. So could you just go ahead and give us your background first and how you got started with what you're doing?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Missy. So I'm Andy Liddell. My wife, Julie, and I founded the EdTech Law Center in 2023 to help solve problems where school meets technology. We've been activists for a long time, arising from an incident in our own community in around 2019. I became involved in Fair Play as an activist, and then we just kept hearing the same stories over and over and over again, and realized that not only were kids' privacy rights being violated, kids were getting hurt in real, more immediate material ways through their computers at school, and we thought that was wrong, and these companies should be held legally accountable, and so we started our law firm to help them.
And that's the EdTech Law Center, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I wish I had gone into law. I feel like that is something I would have been very good at, but I didn't go that route. But we have amazing people like you who can do the hard work, frankly, which is, I think it's very hard what you're doing because you're going up against some pretty big companies, right?
We are. Yeah, it's a real David and Goliath, but like I like to say, don't forget that David won, and we're right, and we're going to win.
I love that story, or love that analogy. That's so good. So I have some notes here from some of the past things I've heard you say that I thought this one was particularly interesting. So you have said EdTech is social media in a sweater vest, which I think is probably, first of all, it's hilarious, but I also don't think that's what people would think of because there's a bit of a misnomer or misunderstanding perhaps that if something has the educational label, then it must be okay. So can you unpack what you mean by that?
Sure. Yeah. So that's my very good friend Emily Churkin came up with that. But she's let me use it. So ed tech is big tech in a sweater vest, and the idea is that the business model is the same. So social media, ed tech, the entire internet has this business model that's relatively new and different from what we grew up with. So I started kindergarten in 1989, and computers were really different in 1989. And I think we all, think about how things were when we were kids, when we think about our own kids in school. And, unless you've been really, studying this stuff like I have, it's easy to miss. And it's easy just to think, oh, this is the internet. But this is an internet. This is not the way the internet always was. It's not the way the internet always has to be. But this particular internet has changed in ways that are very harmful to the human user on the other side of the screen.
Oh my goodness, you say that so well. I know we were talking before we got started here about I, as a mom, I have 3 kids, 3 girls, and all teens now. My youngest just graduated high school. So I find it interesting because my background is all in technology. I'm just recently to the nonprofit space and truly advocating, which I love. I never want to leave this because I feel finally like I have a purpose. But before that, I lived in the business and technology world. I love technology. My degree is in computers. Like that's what I went to school for. That's what I've worked. And I think what I've realized recently is that I was applying a bit of my childhood perspective of which was less tech experience to then getting exposed to tech and being involved in tech and thinking that my kids would be okay. So do you think that's a common misconception that parents are making?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And also to be fair, these companies are going way out of their way to obscure what they're doing with all the information they collect behind the scenes and selling their products as being, oh, well, look how cool and useful and good this is for you, or at least they used to. Now that everybody's locked in, we're all trapped in this ever worsening experience. But at least in the beginning, these things they're subsidized by a lot of venture capital. They're fun. They're not worried about making money. So it's easy to get people on board. But then over time, it becomes a lot less fun and a lot more of a coercive environment.
Oh my God, it's so true. And coercion, it's so many hard words, but or like harmful words, but it's really the truth. And it's awful to think that they're doing this with our kids and our kids' data. So let's talk about that for a little bit, because I think that part is we all do these like, I agree to everything, and you sign your life away in order to play Farmville or whatever your app is, Candy Crush, right? But we know it's almost like we're so desensitized to it, I think, because people don't necessarily fully realize how much their data is being shared. So I think, though, a lot of people probably don't even think of school devices tracking our data. So can you talk a little bit to what kind of data is being tracked, and what should parents, what if you were trying to get people to realize, like, you really need to get it, what do they need to know?
So it's literally everything. It's literally everything. And so you think about the obvious stuff, like, your attendance records and your end of term grades, right? Or then your homework grades, your assignments. Then there's all this other stuff of, like, how quickly are you completing your assignments? Are you rushing through them? Are you taking your time? Are you on task? Are you switching between things? All of this is being collected by somebody somewhere, and there's enough data being exchanged that, at least the ideal of these companies, certainly the ones that target adults, they want to complete what they call a psychographic profile. So a psychological demographic profile of you that they can use in all kinds of ways. Because basically the idea is that if they know what you're going to do, if they can predict what you're going to do, that prediction is valuable, and they sell that prediction to somebody else looking to make money based on what they think you're going to do, right? And so a simple example, buying a new TV. Well, I want to make sure that my ads are only going to people who are going to buy a new TV, so I can look at all the stuff you do online, synthesize it together, and say, okay, well, Andy's pretty darn likely to buy a TV. Let's show him an ad now, right? Because it's Saturday and there's that one dead spot in the TV and he's watching the Aggies. And so he's ready to pull the trigger on a new TV. This may or may not be
a reality
from my own life. But
it's very specific.
So that's what they're trying to do. But this stuff is used for all kinds of purposes and all kinds of ways where we don't really know. And so there's a thing called a real-time bidding market where this goes out instantly and is traded among these data brokers. And so it's not an exaggeration to say for many people, they know where you are and what you're thinking at all times. And that sounds crazy and it sounds overstated, but really good reporting and treatises have been written on this. And so The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff is a really good place to start. Means of Control by Byron Tao. Professor Zuboff was at Harvard. Byron Tao, I think he's here in D.C. I met him in April when I was here. Used to write for the Wall Street Journal. I mean, really, really solid reporting has shown what these companies are trying to do and what they're at least, desiring to do. And school really isn't any different, because if you think about how valuable it is to get inside of an adult's head, well, so much more so of a child.
So why? I have my thoughts for it, but tell me, why should we be more concerned? Why would it be more valuable to get inside the head of a child?
Well, I mean, that's what therapy is for, right?
That's so true.
Right. If you think about, all these things that happen to you in childhood and the things that set your personality and just set, how you respond to challenges and how you respond to other people, what you're good at in school, if you think about, and again, this is all theoretical, but you just have to think what's the worst thing I can think of, and then realize there's a lot of people who are being paid to think of much worse things than you are. But you have predatory loans, and you want to target people who are really bad at math. Well, if that information's out there somewhere, then you can find a way to do that. And so, one potential example of how this stuff could be misused.
That's such a good example, though, because this is the kind of thing that I love talking about so much, because if you're not in the space, then chances are, I think most people are not malicious people, and it's not even going to occur to you that someone would do something like that. It sure wouldn't occur to me. Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's just absolutely wild. Some other areas where I've seen the concept, and I think that maybe you can validate this or tell me I'm crazy, is by getting to know who the child is and getting in their brain, you can actually start to shift their perspective. And so I think it was in The Social Dilemma that they were talking about it, this idea that it's not just the prediction, but actually having influence on changing someone's decisions or impacting how they feel about things, which that is really scary because kids are much more malleable, I think, than adults. I mean, adults still can be manipulated, but children are still in that growth phase. And that's just really terrifying to think of that it could be happening in schools. So obviously, I would see that mostly in AI, but could that also, what other parts of ed tech should we be concerned about?
Well, I mean, I'm concerned about all of it. I'm concerned about the efficacy of it. I'm concerned that it's really disrupting what education is for. I'm concerned that it's deprofessionalizing the teaching workforce, and that it's instrumentalizing children as just means of collection. I think that we've had 25 years of trying to reform education in a certain way that hasn't worked, and I think this has arisen alongside of that. The idea that that you basically performance-based funding, I think, is a really dangerous and counterproductive idea because the ones that are good get more, the ones that are bad get less. We don't really do that with other things in life. If people are falling behind, you help them. That's not how our current system is set up. So it really is very it can lead to really unfair results, and a lot of this is kind of happening parallel with the rise of ed tech.
So are you saying that if a school is doing better, then they can get rewarded with more, if they're, I guess, performing better, then they can get rewarded with more ed tech essentially?
Or more funding, more federal
Oh,
funding.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
All right.
so, and so a lot of this ed tech is put in place to hit metrics that, that have been variously set by George W. Bush and then Obama and then, Trump and Biden. Like this has been a bipartisan thing.
Yeah.
There's been a big bipartisan consensus on this where, with a lot of things that have happened this century, I think each successor has kind of, made it worse in certain ways.
Yeah.
And so, now we're at a point where we've, in 12 years of this new ed tech revolution, have erased 50 years of progress across, all the core subjects. Beginning in 2012. And 2012 was the year of these one-to-one devices came online, and we allowed companies who are expert in manipulating attention to be the ones to put these things into school. Well, attention is the thing you need to learn. That is one fundamental thing, right? And if you let companies like Google, whose whole business model is premised on pointing your attention where it makes them the most money, well, no wonder kids have lost a tremendous amount of gains, because what we experience as distraction, just messing around online, Google experiences as profit because we're messing around online, and that's data for them. And so, even kids are less computer literate than they were. We all know, and yes.
Wait a minute.
What? In 2018, kids were quite a bit more computer literate than they were. And I believe 2024 was the subsequent study. It had fallen, I mean, by an appreciable amount, both in understanding, how computers work, and then computational thinking as well.
Wow.
Because it just isn't the case that by putting a kid next to a computer, they learn how the computer works, especially if
That's fair.
Right, they're not receiving direct instruction about the computer, about how it does work, and you're just online, and your attention is drawn to these things that are the most tantalizing. And it's not only drawn to those things, you're being pushed in that direction. And so, when a kid is looking at 10,000 YouTube videos in a 6-week period, like some of my clients have, well, that's not necessarily a fault of the kid. That could be an underlying issue with ADHD or autism sometimes, but it's also, why is this even possible? Why is this an environmental hazard for this child whatsoever? They don't need to be on YouTube at school. It's a problem when you're looking at YouTube in math class. It's a problem when you're doing English homework in math class, right? It's like you need to be kept on task so you can learn the thing that you're there to learn. And none of this is designed to do that.
It's so funny because you talk about YouTube and then the distractions online, and all I could think of is, as adults, how common is it that you start down the YouTube rabbit hole? Or I think my dad said he used to do this thing with Wikipedia, and I've heard of other people doing this too, that you just start clicking on links, like you go from one topic to the next, and you start here and you end up some random other place. And if that can happen as adults, then why would anyone think that kids would do this better?
Well, exactly. And these companies have, it's no secret, behavioral engineers, and there is this whole science that's called persuasive design.
Yes.
That arose in Stanford in the late 1990s. And so happy to talk more about
Please
that
do.
if you want.
Yes, please explain that, because
yeah.
that is like insidious.
Right. And so I guess stepping back, so we have two things that happened around the same time. So we had Google invented this new business model of the internet. And so I'm old enough that the internet was a thing we used to pay for by the minute, right? And
I remember that.
It was loud. I mean, I think people don't even remember the modem sounds, but so it was loud, it was slow, and it was expensive. And so it was naturally limiting what you had to do online. Then we had the dot-com, boom, bubble, burst, and some survivors were still hanging out. And so Google found a way to turn what they used to call digital exhaust into profit. That basically they collected all of this information about users, technical information, what we call metadata, things about your browser, your device, just your behaviors with a computer, your mouse movements, your keyboard typing patterns, all these things that were technically necessary, useful in some ways, but largely were thrown away. And they were able to, algorithmically and with a bunch of very smart people, figure out, we can use, this is actually suggestive of people's intent, and we can understand what they're going to do next. And by knowing what they're going to do next, we can advertise against that. That's how all this stuff started, was advertising. Because, the way the internet started out, people became very quickly unaccustomed to paying for content. And so that's how they got started. And over time, you realize, the way we make better predictions is more data. And, I can choose to interact with a thing up to a point, but then, I accomplish my task, I get bored, I move on. But Google doesn't want you to move on. They want you to stay. And so then persuasive design was this other discipline that arose around the same time out of Stanford. And basically that was the idea that you can use a computer to influence human behavior for the benefit of somebody else. And if you think about 1998, giant computers, slow internet, that seemed pretty radical. But as they became smaller, shrunk to the size of a smartphone, is actually much, much easier to do that. And so it sits at the intersection of computer science and human psychology. And what behavior engineers do is they use our human nature against us. Things that we naturally do, they redirect those things to benefit themselves.
That is so frustrating to think of, because I know I've read about persuasive design also about how similar it is to, is it what is being used in casinos as well, essentially?
So casinos sort of backed into this.
Oh, okay,
right?
Right.
But then over time they did start refining it, right? And so there's a book called Addiction by Design. I believe Natasha Schull is her name, if I'm not mistaken. But it talks about the casino gaming industry and this idea that you get into this flow state, right? And she talked to these gambling addicts, and they, talked about, people think that I'm trying to play to win. Well, I'm actually trying to play to achieve this basically this flow state of where nothing matters. I'm just going and playing and playing. They call it the machine zone.
Oh, wow.
And so I have this sort of unity with me and the slot machine in front of me, and nothing else. The world ceases to exist. I'm just playing and playing and playing. And the techniques, whether they were copied directly or were just converged on the same designs, it's the same thing. And so, I think no one can deny that gambling addiction is real.
Yeah.
In the same way that these products, also are addictive for various people. And just like gambling addiction, some people are more prone to it than others. Some people are better able to resist it than others. But for a certain percentage of the population, it's really going to be something that they cannot control.
Yeah.
And for a larger percent of the population, it's going to be things that you play an extra hand or two. You stick around a little bit longer, and it benefits them a little bit more.
It's interesting that you bring up this flow state, because that is not exactly where I'd been exposed, or I guess the direction that I had heard it. It was more the concept of, I guess where I came into persuasive design was when I was really studying more on video games and social media's aspect of it. But as I understand it, EdTech obviously still does this too. Can and before I say this, I want to make sure I'm going to put a pin in it, that I want to come back and talk to all the laws about data that are so out of date. But real quick, that's so interesting that you, again, talk about this flow state, because I feel like that's what we see with our kids and screens. So obviously EdTech must be doing this in some way. What are they doing to utilize this persuasive design?
So that comes up often in these gamified apps, and so basically it's a math game or vocabulary game or whatever, but emphasis hugely on the game part.
Okay.
And so it's gamified education, and some people will argue that external rewards are a big part of education system anyway. What is a grade other than an external reward? But
fair.
The difference between a grade and rewards in the app context is usually your grades track somewhat with your effort, right? Your effort, your preparation, your mastery, right? Whereas it's the variable reward that's at the heart of the gamification. And so another book recommendation, Hooked, by Nir Eyal. So the person who developed these techniques initially was a Stanford guy named B.J. Fogg, and then Nir Eyal took all of this more academic stuff, translated it for the common computer developer, and published this book that's basically, it's in the bookshelf of every interface designer. And so, but it's this idea of the variable reward that keeps you coming back. And so the idea that when you log on to whatever your social media app of choice is, you don't really know what's there, what's going to be next.
Yeah.
So there's that element of curiosity, and you don't know, well, who's responded to me? What's have I got any responses? And so the idea is that you by doing this hook cycle enough times, you associate. I look at my phone, and then the first thing I do is open my social media app, and then I go to this, I go to that, and you basically are visually cued to do a behavior.
Wow.
And so it's really sophisticated stuff.
Yeah.
I'm very offended by it, but it doesn't mean it's not clever and interesting. And certainly is serving their bottom line.
Yeah.
But I think it's very, very hostile to human agency and not things we want used on our kids. And so, in a similar way, you have things like loot boxes, and so those are variable rewards that happen in video games.
Yeah.
And so you beat a level, and you might get a relatively common new skin or outfit or whatever, or you might get something really rare, and you don't really know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And so, or you might get to choose. You might get to click one of 3 boxes and something comes out. But it's sort of gambling light for children. And again, I've had clients talk about and they're embarrassed, but like my kid's addicted to this math game. They're like destroying their academic record just by playing this math game at school, and they're baffled by it, right?
Yeah.
And so, but then when we sit down and talk about it, it's like, well, really, there's nothing different, really, than sitting down in front of a slot machine for your kid.
Yeah.
And those types of things are pretty prevalent in EdTech, because there's this idea of gamified education somehow is beneficial for kids.
Yeah.
But it's really not. It's good for these companies. It can sell more because what they say is, well, look how the kids love it because they're look how much they're playing it.
Yeah.
But that's like saying, well, look how much this gambling addict loves to gamble, or how much this heroin addict loves heroin. Right? It's like we're not really that dependency is not a great reflection of their emotional relationship with this. They're not really developing a love for math. They're developing a compulsion to play the math game.
That is said so well. Yes, they're developing the compulsion to play the math game, which then that translates, I think, to other scenarios, other addictive situations,
Yes.
and unfortunately probably even more addictive games if they get exposed to it. Because I heard a while ago, I read somewhere that if you have an addictive personality, then whatever addictive thing that you are exposed to first is what you will end up getting addicted, or most likely end up getting addicted to. So if you happen to get exposed to alcohol first, then you will probably become an alcoholic. If you happen to be exposed to drugs first, if you happen to be exposed to gambling or that sort of thing. And now I think seeing so much with gamification of education that unfortunately parents get duped, because we want to do the best for our kids and we're told it's okay. And most of the time, I think you look back like, I remember playing whatever silly
Oregon Trail.
Right? Yes. Which, did we learn anything from it other than we all died from
I
dysentery?
learned what dysentery was.
I don't think I even actually really knew what dysentery was. Like, I knew that I would die from it, though.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's such a great example. Like, that was such a game. It was a game. It was a game first. It so was. Okay, so let's dive back, because when we first talked, one of the most interesting things that you helped me to understand is how greatly lacking we are in the data protections area, because I think, when was the last law? We're like 20, 30 years ago?
The major one protecting kids is COPPA, and that was from 1998.
Like, that's insane to me. Like you were just saying, very different world, 1998 to today. So and then is FERPA the other one? Can you just explain what those two laws are?
Sure, yeah. So let's start with FERPA. So FERPA came out of kind of the rights revolution of the late 60s and 70s after, there were a lot of abuses of civil rights, and the government cracked down on war protesters, and they would actually go and pull their college records and then target them for retaliation for speaking out. And this came out with the Church Commission and others, and then Christopher Buckley, Republican, I think from Connecticut, led the charge with FERPA, because he thought, well, we can't be using kids' academic records this way, right? Everybody has a right to privacy in their academic records and a right to know who they're being disclosed to and why. Your credit score protections, all these things came out at the same time. Okay. And the idea of this personal information about you being used against you without your knowledge is offensive to us as a democracy was one that was widely shared at the time, and one that I think is widely shared still. And so FERPA, the idea was, we're going to establish very, very tight controls on your education record. And it applied to schools, and essentially said schools only in very limited circumstances can disclose information about a student without their consent if they're over 18, or without their parents' consent if they're under 18. They did establish what they called a school official exception, which is if there is a person who's acting under the direct control of the school, then certain information about a student could be disclosed to that person without consent. But that person can't redisclose that information, right?
Okay.
So once you redisclose it, you're no longer a school official. So that's FERPA. But basically, the idea is it sets a high expectation of privacy in your academic records. And then we have COPPA, which came along in 1998, and it was meant to provide additional privacy protections to kids online under 13. And so, again, it established very strict rules that if you are an internet company and you know that you're interacting with a kid under 13, then you have to collect almost no information about them. And the only information you can collect is to get permission from their parents to collect more information.
Why under 13, just out of curiosity?
I don't know. I think that was just the settlement that came out. The idea was that, kids are online, and, but I really don't know, but I suspect it was a compromise.
Yeah.
But neither of those laws did away with the entire other body of privacy law that exists, right? We still have all of this other privacy law that exists, that's found in the Constitution and state constitutions, in the common law, and so we have a lot of privacy protection. But what has happened is FERPA applies to schools and is enforceable by the Education Department only as of 2002, which was the same year that surveillance capitalism was invented. And then COPPA, there's no private right of action there either. It's enforceable only by the Federal Trade Commission and state attorneys general. And so these laws have gone under-enforced for a long time. At the same time, the EdTech industry has built up, what essentially are urban legends about what these laws allow them to do, and they establish this conventional wisdom that doesn't exist anywhere in the law.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm happy to go into that if
Please
you
do,
want.
because I think a lot of people misunderstand what is happening with this.
Right. And so basically, again, you and I, adults online, we use a product on our phone. If a company were to take all this information from us without our consent, that would be unlawful. That we could sue them for that, for an invasion of privacy. What makes it okay is that they have this term of service, and they say, this is everything we're taking from you, and this is how we're using it. And by using our product, you consent to these terms. And so this consent by conduct paradigm has arisen, last 30 years or so, right? Once they ran out of adults to sell stuff to, they started looking into schools and thinking about kids and applied that same logic to them. But we had the problem with FERPA and the problem with COPPA, right? Because you need to get parent consent. And it's cumbersome to get parent consent. Nobody wants to get parent consent because then you have to tell them what you're doing and get them to agree to it, right? And so as an in run around trying to get parent consent, the industry basically came up with the idea that under FERPA, companies are school officials, and that everything a company can contrive to collect about a kid at school is an education record, and therefore parental consent is never required. And they have that written up in their contracts. So some of these companies do.
Wait a minute. They write it up in the contracts with the schools?
Or they're just their general terms of service that says, we are a school official under FERPA, and that means we can take everything from you without consent, and we can use it however we want.
And now you said that if they redisclose it, then it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So
yes, and also that FERPA applies to schools, not companies. So
well, yeah,
right.
Definitely.
There's several gaping holes in this logic, but it's gone unchallenged for a long time because FERPA also, the enforcement mechanism is very, very harsh, which is we take federal funding away from the school that violated FERPA, and nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to further attack and defund our public schools, and so FERPA has really, at least in this realm, has gone basically unenforced for 50 years.
Oh my gosh.
And so, again, I think for well-intended reasons, also, the ed department isn't always the best resource. There's other, bigger fish to fry.
Wait a minute. What well-intended reasons are there for not enforcing this, though?
Maybe more structural reasons.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Right.
All right.
That's, if you have, if you have like blatant civil rights violations happening,
fair.
right? You only have so many lawyers.
That's
and
fair.
so,
100%.
and these things, they're kind of abstract and they're hidden too, because people don't really appreciate, everything that happens when your data is being collected by these companies. And so they also developed a whole big lie about COPPA too. And that basically said that COPPA allows schools to stand in the shoes of parents and make decisions about what is okay and not okay to collect about kids.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. It's not in the law either. And so the text of the law says nothing about that. There are 5 enumerated exceptions in COPPA. None of them have to do with schools.
Oh, my goodness.
And that language comes from, the manifestly non-binding, what's called the Statement of Basis and Purpose. But it's just this front material giving context to the law, and then the law that Congress passed, the rule that the administrative agency adopted. And it was one line taken totally out of context that has then, again, through federal non-enforcement across many administrations and through industry repeating it over and over again, become the conventional wisdom. But the conventional wisdom isn't enough to override the text of the law, which says if you're going to collect information about kids under 13, you need parents' permission. But companies have gone so far to say that not only does this allow us to take, that schools can stand in parents' shoes and decide what information is taken about kids, they can also decide to waive a kid's right to a jury trial and force them into binding arbitration. And so
my goodness.
we have a case up on appeal before the Ninth Circuit that's going to be heard in early January about this exact issue. And very, very encouragingly, 2 consecutive Federal Trade Commission boards have weighed in. And so under Lena Khan, they submitted a unanimous amicus brief at the trial level. And then on appeal, the FTC under Commissioner Andrew Ferguson also submitted a unanimous amicus brief, basically in support of our position, which is this is not what the law says. Under 13 means under 13. Verified parent consent means they're actual parents. So we're feeling good about that, and it is encouraging to see the continuity of thought across 2 pretty different administrations.
Yeah.
And so but this is what the industry said. I mean, these are basically the pillars that this whole thing exists on. The third leg of the stool is that actually you have no right of privacy at school at all.
Whoa, is that a new thing?
That's what they're saying.
Oh, wow.
And basically, everyone knows how the internet, the internet's different now, and everyone knows when you sit down in front of a computer, we take everything and use it however we want to. And so you have no expectation of privacy at school, which again, wildly unconstitutional. This is not, you can't just do away with the Constitution because it suits your business model. And so I expect that's where the fight's going to move now, which is they're going to try and say, well, kids have, they have no expectation of privacy whatsoever. But we have a long history to the contrary that says, you can't just open a kid's backpack without reason to, or search their locker without reason to, or make them take a drug test without reason to. And so, we are confident that if the terrain shifts that way, we'll beat them there too.
Well, that's good. That is encouraging. It's so good to hear the positivity, because sometimes when you see David and Goliath, it gets, Goliath gets a little scary looking.
Yeah, he's a big guy.
Yeah. And but it's encouraging to know that there really are so many good people out there, especially once they realize what's happening. Real quick, and then I know we're getting right up on time,
Sure.
but I was wondering, can you just unpack a little there? Explain why that the fact of signing away your right to a jury and settling for arbitration, can you just, in silly, just normal person terms, layperson, can you just explain why that would be so bad?
Yeah. So we have a right to a jury trial, right? And that's very important. That's been a feature of American law and English law before it for centuries. And it's important, both to get my rights vindicated and that the public knows what's going on, right? And so it serves multiple purposes. When you're made to go into arbitration, which is just a fancy word for private business court, then it's not transparent and it's not done openly in front of a jury. It's done by, one or three arbitrators. And, because, me as an individual consumer, I'm only going to go to arbitration once, but these massive companies go back to arbitration time and time and time again, there's a bit of a home field advantage for companies in arbitration, or at least it's perceived. I'm sure that I know that arbitrators do their best, but it's human nature, again, to, credit the people you see more over the people that you see less, and so, and that's a choice that we should get to have. And, unfortunately right now, so much of our life is tied up in arbitration. We actually have very few rights to take companies to trial on a class basis or do it in public court because of these very onerous arbitration clauses. And so what we're hoping to do is crack open that arbitration law a little bit, because that is 100 years old. This idea of arbitration, that came out of, our courts, if you think they're slow and dysfunctional now, they used to be really slow and really dysfunctional, and there was this reform movement. And but before that, there were businesses that mutually agreed, this is taking too long. If you think about like a construction dispute, I'm a subcontractor, you're a contractor, we've got a dispute over payment. Well, I want to get paid. We want to get this thing resolved. And so we negotiate a contract and say, let's go to the arbitrator. Let's skip court. Let's go to the arbitrator. Well, that's a choice businesses should be able to make, right? Because it actually benefits them. Here, when it's forced on a consumer in the context of using something that you have to use or virtually have to use, it's a lot less fair.
Yeah.
And so maybe once we've slain EdTech, we'll take on big arbitration. But
there you go. You have your next.
Yeah. But it's all. For me, it's the unfairness of all of it.
Yeah.
That like you have a right to go to school without being surveilled all the time, without making another company money, without having this, these ulterior motives that are there. It's like school should be for the benefit of kids and the benefit of all of us by educating them.
Yeah.
And same with arbitration. Like it's unfair to have these things forced on you.
Yeah. That's really well said. Well, all right. So to wrap it up, first of all, let everyone know where can they follow you, find out more about what you're doing, if that's something you want. I don't know.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Great. Yeah. So the EdTech Law Center, we're a consumer protection law firm in Austin, Texas. So we are contingency fee based, meaning that people don't pay out of pocket for our services. Julie and I, it's very important to us that there are no barriers to people who need our services. And we talked a lot about data today, but our cases span a pretty wide range. And so if there's a product that your kid is using that you're concerned about, reach out and we can talk about the privacy aspects of that. We do very thorough investigations before we ever file a lawsuit about their data practices. But parents may also have more immediate harms about, my kid has become addicted to YouTube, or my kid is being sexually solicited by a stranger, or my kid is, being sexually extorted by a stranger, or cyberbullied, or have AI deepfakes made of them. All these things where you don't expect that to happen when your kid goes to school, and they used to not happen. And those are all a function of this business model and this environment that we've just thrown kids into, that I say the responsibility is on the companies ultimately. It's not on the school, it's not on the parents, it's not on the kid. The company needs to play by the same rules as everybody else. And so if basically the way we put it, we solve problems where school needs technology. And if a bad thing has happened to your kid on a computer at school, give us a call. And so we're at edtech.law. There's a little contact us box. Fill out the form and we'll get in touch with you as soon as we can.
And I can attest that you are quick to respond, which is awesome. And that was not even with a business thing. So it's just for a great conversation.
We certainly do our best. I think things have picked up since we last talked. So
I got you at a lucky time.
But we will respond. We definitely will respond. Yeah.
And I believe it. Well, Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any, do you have any like final things that you, or any bit that you would like to leave people with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, if you're struggling with this stuff, you're not alone. We talk to parents all across the country. I mean, big cities, small towns, far left, far right, in the middle. Like this is a thing that affects everybody. And so if you want to make change in your community, certainly call us, but also find everybody else, because this is something that can be kind of a seedbed for community and action and getting to know other people and making change that's favorable for your kids and your family. And it's something that there is very widespread agreement on, that what we're doing right now with our kids and technology in school is not working.
Yeah.
And that we all deserve better, and they especially deserve better.
I agree. And I would like to remind everybody that if you are curious about the reasons why it's not working, we actually had some great folks on one of our recent episodes that we were talking about the cognitive declines and everything that was happened. So that's one reason why I didn't need to drill you on that, although I know that you are very aware of all that stuff. So thank you so much for joining us. And now I am super excited to dive into the debate in just a little bit.
Can't wait.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us for today's discussion with Andy Liddell. As always, please come back to see all the things that we're creating at m4lacademy.org. As a reminder, we cover topics that are impacting kids, schools, and parental rights. We pick one topic each month. If you go to our website and look under the resource library, you'll see all sorts of things already covered, including SEL, CRT, gender ideology, CSE, and so much more. We've got more technology topics coming up. You're not going to want to miss it, so stay tuned. Thank you again, and we will see you after the debate.